Around 10 miles from Ardguy in Sutherland, along a single-track road, sits a little church nestled among some trees, with a graveyard surrounding it. In 1845 it became a place of refuge at the height of the clearances, as families from the district were being evicted. The church, designed by Thomas Telford, was built in 1827 on land donated by the local landowners, the Rosses of Balnagown. It was one of 43 so-called parliamentary churches and manses, as a thank you following the victory of Britain during the Napoleonic Wars. The government also agreed to pay the ministers taking up these posts in the remote Highlands £120 a year. The area of land given for the building of Croick Church was already established, with crofters meeting regularly on Sundays to hear a travelling preacher deliver his sermons. The building itself cost just over £1,400. The first minister appointed to it was the Reverend Robert Williamson, who was inducted in September the following year. He remained in the post until 1840. Most of the families living on Sir John Lockhart Ross's estate were crofters, working small areas of land, but with the coming of improvement, Ross began clearing the land for sheep. The clearances finally reached Croick in 1842, when the factor for Major Charles Robertson of Kindees, James Galanders, tried to evict the tenants of Glencalvie. Their rent was high, more than £55 per annum, but somehow they managed to pay it year on year. They lived in turf-roofed dwellings, grew barley and oats, and had cattle and sheep, but little in the way of possessions. It was a hard life, made harder by the sweeping changes of commercialism. In 1843, the disruption took place, with the Free Church breaking away from the established church. At Croick, it had a huge impact. The congregation had been around 200 people, but most followed their minister, Gustavus Aird, leaving only 2 families worshipping there. In the late spring of 1845, a Times newspaper reporter arrived at Croick Church and described the scene before him. The congregation of 10 sat and listened to the Reverend John MacDonald's sermon in both Gaelic, their native tongue, and English. He'd already passed a group of people sitting on a hillside listening to a sermon in the open. These were the people of Glencalvie, evicted from their homes with nowhere to go. At Croick, he inquired about what had happened, as he knew the evictions were about to take place. He was shown a tarpaulin stretched over a couple of poles next to the church, with the sides made up with shawls, blankets, rugs and plaids. This turned out to be shelter for the evicted families. Only a few people in the glen had escaped the notice to quit. These were an old man of 82 who was deemed too infirm to leave, and the upheaval would kill him, and a family looking after the fisheries on the Duke of Sutherland's estate. In all, 80 people sought sanctuary under this tarpaulin. Everything apart from their bedding was distributed between their neighbours, and on Saturday 24th May, 12 of the 18 families sheltered in the kirkyard, having found none available from factors or heritors. 2 or 3 carts carried their children, while the rest carried their bedding. A fire had been set for the children to huddle round, and 2 cradles were placed nearby to keep the youngest of the contingent nice and warm. The children played, unaware of the severity of the situation. Meanwhile, the tent was divided into compartments using blankets as privacy for each family. There were 23 children under the age of 10, 7 adults in poor health, and 10 aged 60. The rest were mainly middle-aged, although there were 8 young men who were newly married. For a week they stayed in this insufficient shelter until the day arrived when settlement was due, which was to pay them for their livestock. The young men walked to Ardguy, where they met Mr. McKinnon of Tain to settle the accounts. Each family was to receive around 18 shillings, and although they'd been supporting themselves, it wasn't much to begin again somewhere else. Most of them were unskilled, so finding work would have proved difficult. News reached the camp of the settlement, and the people moved on. Before they left, they shook the reporter's hand and thanked him for recording their plight. Although he spoke no Gaelic and they no English, he understood. What became of these crofters is unknown. On the east window of the church is evidence of these people, with names and dates etched in the glass. One has the date of the eviction, 24th May 1845. Another refers to the Glencalvie people as the wicked generation, and another reads, Glencalvie people was in the churchyard here, May 24th, 1845. A final one to mention is the Glencalvie tenants resided here, May 24th, 1845. Until the mid-1940s, the Croick church remained independent until it united with the parish of Kincardine. It remains in use today and can be visited by those who wish to remember the Glencalvie people. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.